Francis E. Babe Hawke. We're not talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the blockade. But let me set this up now. So, prior to the president's announcement of the blockade, you've already briefed, you've already changed, basically done what you had to convert the war plan. Made sure the right weapon systems are in the right places, both conventional and nuclear, to carry out the plan with regard to the Soviet missiles in Cuba. This was all done before the president announces the blockade?
Yeah.
Because he had to obviously know his options.
Yeah, of course, they were at the very top level, naturally. We were the underlings. But he had to decide what was going to happen. So he had decided on a naval blockade to keep the Russians from coming in with their boats. But it was a funny story because we would get a briefing every morning, the first thing on intelligence, showing us the pictures that were taken of Cuba and all that other thing. And so this one morning we were going to get a briefing on what the president decided. And we were going to hear him give his talk before he talked to the public. And so the fellow that was across the desk from me was a fellow by the name of Major Kit Carson. And he said, "What do you think we're going to do?" as we were walking back to the war room. And I said, "Well, we had three things we could do. We could bomb them with conventional, we could bomb them with nuclear, or we could put up a naval blockade."
Now, this was after you had heard.
After, yeah, I'd gotten the briefing ahead of time. Yeah.
But he didn't know that.
He didn't know that. there were only about 5 of us that got those briefings in the morning. So he said, but I said, "I think he's going to do a naval blockade." I said, of course, they haven't done one of those since 1875. I said, "But I think it's a good idea." And Kit says, "Oh no," he says, "I'll bet you." I said, "Okay." I said, "But you got to give me some odds." I said, "How about 20-1?" I said, "Those are about the right odds for that happening." He says, "Okay." And I said, "How about a martini? 20 martinis to 1." He said, "Okay." So I stopped to talk to somebody, and he went in and he sat down almost in the front row of where the TV was going to be. And by the time I got there, I was sitting on a desk in the back. So the president gave his preamble.
How many people were in this room?
Oh, about 40.
40, yeah.
And so the president gave his preamble, and he says, "And I decided to do a naval blockade." Kit stood up, turned around to look at me, and he says, "You SOB." He said, "You knew, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, and I want those martinis." Never got them. But that was kind of a side joke to that thing.
Now you were in the underground from the time the intelligence started coming in and you started working on this.
Yeah, we were actually, we didn't leave. We were down in the underground almost all the time.
So, I mean, I think the crisis went on for something like 13 days.
Yeah,
And
well,
that entire time
it was 40 days that we were.
40 days?
Yeah, because we started ahead of time and
Yeah.
we cleaned it up afterwards.
So, but for what period of time did you not leave the underground in that 40 days?
Probably almost every day we didn't leave except to go eat.
Uh-huh.
And then we would maybe go over to the club for dinner or something like that. But we were on call all the time and present for duty.
Uh-huh. Were you restricted to the base? Did you come home at that point?
I got home a couple of times because Mom and Dad had come to visit.
I remember. Because I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
What were you feeling at that time? Did you think we were close to the brink?
Well, I thought we were very close to bombing Cuba, yes, but not. I wasn't worried about an international war. Mm-hmm. The war plan itself. I didn't worry about that.
Why?
I don't know. I just thought that we were too strong and we're too much in control, and with the intelligence that we were given every day.
Mm-hmm. So you felt pretty confident that the Russians would back down?
Yes.
And we would avoid a nuclear
face-off.
Okay. And you were right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how you felt Kennedy did a good job?
And who?
You thought Kennedy did a good job?
Oh yeah, yeah. The only time he didn't do a good job is he didn't support the invasion of Cuba.
Yeah. Now, were you at all involved in that?
Not that at all. That was a complete surprise to us.
So okay, so you were not even aware it was going to take place ahead of time.
No.
That's interesting. Okay. There was, you were continuing to fly during this period.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think there was a funny thing that happened with a T-33.
Yeah, yeah. We were practicing. We were just taking off, and to go up and do some more training, and I pulled the gear up and it wouldn't come up. It clanged. Well, of course, the emergency procedure when that happened was to put the landing gear handle back down because it was an indication that the nose wheel was cocked.
Mm-hmm.
And so pulled it back up, and we climbed up through the overcast and got on top, and we tried to pull it up again, and the same thing happened. It was cocked like this, so it wouldn't come up into the wheel well.
Now this was what, an
F-80.
F-80 training.
Called a T-33, yeah.
Okay, and it's a two-man?
Well, yeah, it's two-man,
Okay.
And I was with an instructor at the time, because this was a part of my training. So we went up above the clouds, and they sent another T-bird up to check to see if it was, and he flew underneath us, and he said, yeah, it's cocked. So they decided to foam the runway. But in the meantime, in order to get rid of the gas, because that would be the worst part if you crashed, was the gas aboard. So we made, I guess, 3 or 4 GCA's, ground control approaches. And then they said, well, come on in. So came in at 105 knots and touched down just before the foam, and then put the nose gear down, and it started to swerve, and I stuck the stick back in my gut and put it down again, and because my flying speed was gone, and it was okay. So stopped.
Landing gear cocked into place.
Yeah, the nose gear cocked into place. And so they came out, put a ladder up, and the crew chief put the ladder up, walked through the foam, and got foam all over the ladder. So when I climbed out, at the last step, I slipped and fell right on my back end. Of course, I had a seat pack on, so it didn't hurt that bad. But it was very embarrassing because they were taking pictures of it.
Who was taking pictures?
The city, the TV people.
Well, the word had gotten out.
Oh yeah. In fact, you guys saw it on TV.
Okay, I gotta get some video of that.
Yeah, but of course I didn't know that they had showed it on TV. So when I got home, I didn't tell anybody about it because it always worried Mom. And then they showed it again that night.
Did they show you falling?
No, they didn't. They were nice about that. I appreciated that.
And so the F-80 was brand new then?
No, the F-80 had been used in the Korean War.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then it was replaced with the F-86.
Now, was it during this period that something happened over in Canadian airspace with regard to a weapon?
No, well, that had happened when we were at Davis Mountain.
Later?
No, earlier.
Or earlier? Okay, we'll talk about that because we skipped over that.
Well, the airplane was coming back from Goose Bay, Labrador, and
Was this during the Korea?
we deployed up there during the Korean War, beginning of the Korean War, and coming back, the aircraft lost an engine, and he couldn't fly anymore with that big heavy weight on it, so he dropped it, and it went off at 5,000 feet, 5,000 pounds of high explosive. And he was able to get into the closest base in the United States. It was Gander or someplace like that, and landed. But the newspaper reported that an aircraft had jettisoned 5 1,000-pound bombs.
Okay.
That was that story. But that's a story about the. I had signed for the weapons and signed for the cables that went around it. And so when I got ready to clear later on to go to Maxwell Air Force Base, why they wouldn't clear me because I didn't turn in this sling that went around the bomb.
But I thought you were part of a group that was supposed to go up and find something.
Yeah, I went up in a helicopter to try to find a training weapon that had been dropped.
Was that a separate incident?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that's what I want to talk about. When did that happen?
That happened while we were at Goose Bay,
Uh-huh.
and the aircraft had gone up on a training mission and had to drop it because he had lost an engine. And up at Goose Bay, Labrador, you didn't know whether you were on an island or on or there were a bunch of lakes. You could tell which because there were so many lakes. So we went out and looked over 3 days and never did find it.
Now, this was a training weapon that didn't explode.
Right.
Right. Now, it fell out with sling, with the sling, or just the weapon?
Just the weapon. Huh?
But what was in it? Did it have explosives in it?
No, it was an inert weapon.
Completely inert, no conventional or nuclear.
No,
nothing.
no.
Okay. But still sensitive from an
Yeah, the
intelligence point.
shape and size and weight were still classified.
So as far as you know, that's never been found.
Yeah.
It's
It wasn't important really.
yeah. But it was probably pretty heavy, so probably whatever it hit, it probably sank quite a way.
Yeah, because there was so much water around. As I said, there were so many lakes, and you didn't know whether you were flying over lakes or flying over islands.
Right. Okay. I mean, what was the routine at SAC headquarters? What you're doing? Was it pretty high stress?
Yeah, it was very high stress because you always had changes. Nothing was ever the same. When you had to prepare for changing the war plan because of change of weapons, change of aircraft, and
Intelligence.
capabilities and so forth. Yeah, and intelligence. So you were constantly not only rewriting the war plan, but the support plan that went with it, which was probably as important as the war plan itself, because you had to make sure that you had the right weapons and ground support equipment at the right base at the right time in the right numbers. And you had to move these things around. Well, having the inventory for all of the weapons, I also had the inventory for all of the support equipment. And this was reported to me daily from the different bomb wings. And so I'd get these many messages in every day, and I'd have to go over them to make sure that everything was copacetic, and so when there was a change, then that's when all hell broke loose, and had to make arrangements to get the C-54s and all the other airplanes that moved the weapons, C-124s mostly, to the different places to get the weapons and move them in the support equipment. But that was all done by hand, as I say, with cards and inventories. And then when we got the 465L system, I changed the system so it was a negative reporting system. That they wouldn't report unless there was a change. So you can see the amount of messages dropped to practically nothing. Because in the first place,
basically every day you were getting a status report. And you didn't want, and you're basically saying, I don't want to hear about it unless there's a change.
That's right, unless there's a change. And I knew when a change was coming because I'd write the requirement for making the change. So this cut out an awful lot of paper reporting by the bases and of course what was coming in to me. But if I had made a change and I didn't get a report, then of course I knew something was wrong. But the negative reporting system was a godsend.
Was it fun? Was it fulfilling? Did you feel like you're doing something important?
Oh yeah, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and there was a lot of stress to it too. Anytime something would happen, an accident or something like that, then of course I was involved because it meant that there had to be a change of some kind.
When was it the guy who put the airplane into the Mediterranean at the end of the runway at Torre Home? When did that happen? You just put the stick forward instead of back. And I think was it a B-49 or something that?
I don't remember that incident. I don't know what you're talking about.
Really? Okay, I thought I was taking off at Torre Home. I think the runway comes off over the ocean.
No, not at Troy. That's in the middle of. That's in Madrid. That's in the middle of Spain.
Oh, okay. Well, there's some NATO base, I think, around the Mediterranean. The guy put the plane into the drink right off the end of the runway.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I don't know where you heard that one.
Okay. What was the most frustrating thing about the job in Omaha? Just what you just mentioned?
Well, the most frustrating to me was the continual bickering between the services. In other words, not what was best for the United States, but what was best for my service. And it griped me because the Navy and the Army and the Marines really didn't have, they weren't participating that much. SAC was the 95% of the force. So they would try to get changes that would be advantageous to them, but not advantageous to the war plan. This was a more frustrating thing. And we had them working right in our office, commanders and captains and from the Navy and lieutenant colonels from the Marines.
And you could sense that they were getting orders.
Oh yeah.
They were working on the orders from their superiors to try to get this and try to get that.
Strictly political.
Yeah. Can you think of any specific examples of that?
No, not really.
But it's just kind of a constant.
Constant bickering, yeah.
And of course, you weren't working on behalf of the Air Force at all.
Oh no, not a bit.
So what would be something like trying to get in a requirement for specific weapon system that they had,
yeah,
or that they wanted to develop?
Yeah, of course they didn't have any. Like we used to say, the Navy would take anything small enough to put on an airplane because the airplanes weren't big enough on the carriers to carry very big weapons, you know. Only the same type of problem with our fighters. And the Army, anything they could put in an Army 45 was we used to.
But then this gets into the whole issue of Rickover and the submarine-based missiles, and was that was obviously in the works.
Oh, yeah. In fact, we had the first commander of a nuclear submarine on our staff, on PSYOP, and we had Navy Marine submarine officers too. And it was interesting in talking to them because there was not one officer that went aboard a nuclear submarine who had not been personally briefed and looked at by Rickover. Yeah, that was interesting. In fact, their wives too.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So at this time, we're talking 62, 63. There were at that time no nuclear armed submarines. Is that correct?
Yes, there were.
Okay, and they were part of your war plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
As I say, we had the first commander of the first nuclear submarine on the staff.
But that was obviously just starting because, as you said, 90% of the weapons were Air Force at that time. So
Yeah. Well, you didn't have that many submarines.
At that time, that would have been the Polaris.
Yeah.
Right?
Percentage-wise, it was very small.
But at that time, it would have been the Polaris, right?
Yeah.
But you were dealing with all the issues of command and control for submarines,
Oh yeah.
which was very difficult.
Well, yeah. They moved around, which they should, and but they had their targets, so they never went any place they couldn't hit their targets. Because otherwise, it'd goof up the whole war plan.
Exactly. Exactly. But the whole issue of command and control, communicating with them, being underwater, a long way away, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we didn't get involved in that too much because that was highly classified too.
So that was just something you would say, if you're exercising the war plan, basically, then you basically delegated that to that service then.
Yeah, they had their targets, and they had to be in an area where they could hit the target and in the timing that was in the war plan. So that, if they moved too far away, so it took longer for their missile to get to the target, why they could knock out an airplane or air-to-surface missile.
What was security like around you guys?
Well, it was we were 4 stories underground, and of course it was guarded by MPs, the entrance to it, and you couldn't get down there unless you had a pass.
And I recall every so often the public was allowed.
Yeah, in fact, the University of Arizona baseball team would come up to play in the College World Series, and I was able to get them clearance to come down and visit the underground. And Pop McHale, the famous Pop McHale, was with the first group that came, and we got all through and walking out the ramp. They had ramps going out, and he said, "Babe," he said, "I don't understand any of this." He says, "But it must be good because it was built during the Republican regime." He was a diehard Republican, Pop McHale was.
But I think wasn't there a situation where some reporters or somebody were given a tour by Powers, and they asked him why they would be open about this? And I think it was a famous
Well, it was
response
during,
from
yeah,
Powers
we
that-
briefed. In fact, I would fly up to Chicago and pick up very high businessmen, the head of big companies and stuff like that, and fly them back, and we'd brief them. We'd brief them on as much as we could without getting into top secret stuff. And they would ask, "Well, how can you do this? Aren't you afraid we're going to go tell people?" And General Powers would say, "I want you to go tell people, to let them know exactly what our capability is." He says, "In fact, I wish that fat pig would be sitting right there talking about the Khrushchev." So I could brief him every day.
Well, I mean, you don't have a deterrent unless people know what you've got.
That's exactly right.
It's like that classic scene in Failsafe. Not Failsafe. No, it's not Failsafe. I don't know what, but anyway, where Peter Sellers is talking to the Soviet president about the doomsday machine that the Soviets had developed, and the president's name, I think, was Dmitri, and the U.S. president says, "Dmitri, you know, why didn't you tell us? You have to tell us about the doomsday machine, or it doesn't do any good." and the ambassador said, "We were waiting for the prime minister's birthday to announce it."
I didn't see that movie.
Oh, great movie, but it was a classic case of a deterrent doesn't work unless the other side knows you have
Yeah,
it.
right.
You know?
You can't be a deterrent if they don't know there's there.
Exactly. So at this time, you're still constantly flying to keep up the status.
Yeah, I was flying different airplanes, the U-3A and the T-33, the C-47, the C-54, the C-97.
And talk a little bit about Looking Glass.
Well, Looking Glass was established as a result of tension in the world, and there would be at times when we just disperse the whole force. So to counter that, then, we started flying airplanes, having airplanes in the air all the time, so they couldn't be hit on the ground. And this was what Looking Glass was all about.
So not only did you have supposedly armed airplanes, presumably,
They had to be, yeah.
right, but you also had an airborne command center,
Yes.
right? That was up 24 hours a day.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's so that if they hit SAC headquarters, the generals in the airplanes in the sky knew the war plan and had all of the paperwork, and
Did you ever fly Looking Glass?
never did.
So you were not assigned to that.
Oh no.
Okay.
That was a separate deal.
Okay, but it was obviously connected with you because you were writing the war plan, so
Yeah.
but they had whatever you had.
Right.
Okay, however it was amended. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you had the KC-139s constantly airborne.
135s.
135s, the tankers.
Yeah.
That would refuel. Were they also airborne all the time?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was quite an operation.
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Anything else about this period that you think is important that we missed?
I can't think of anything that was outstanding. We talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that was probably the biggest one that caused the most conflict.
But you said that lasted 40 days from beginning to end.
Yeah.
At the beginning, how much time elapsed before the American public knew about it?
I would say about after the first 10 days, the word got out that there were people that were leaving Omaha area.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the officers moved their families out.
Interesting.
There are a lot of military, not necessarily just officers.
So, from the time you got the intelligence until President Kennedy went on TV to mention it, you think there was probably, what, 10 days?
No, it was about 20 days from the time we started, yeah.
Okay. And did you pretty much know about because the Russians, I guess, made no attempt to hide it, the fact that they were moving these missiles in, or do you think they were trying to hide it?
Oh yeah, they tried to hide it, yeah.
They just underestimated our satellite capabilities, or what?
I just don't know what they were doing, but they had all the stuff covered on the ships, and the satellites, of course, were taking pictures. And the main thing, those were the pictures of the sites itself,
Right.
where we could see the buildup. And I was able to see those pictures every day, and just exactly where they were. And this, of course, involved in targeting those.
Right.
And
And so was it critical, in your planning, was it critical to hit those before they got hardened?
oh yeah, there wasn't any chance of them getting hardened.
Yeah, so, I mean, the plan assumed that they were...
Yeah, they were. It was all open.
The plan assumed you were going to take the missiles out while they were on the ground before they were installed.
Before they launched
The
them.
targets were hardened.
Yeah.
So were these underground silos, or were these above
They're
ground?
above ground.
Above ground missiles?
Oh yeah, the pictures were beautiful.
Okay. So you had the installations, you had the missiles had not been installed yet.
Well, no, the missiles. Some of the missiles had already been installed,
Really?
which
So
we targeted.
So they were ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it was tense. It was tense. And
But-
the blockade, of course, kept any more ships from coming in, and this was the whole idea of a blockade. Was to stop the buildup of the missiles in Cuba.
So, I mean, obviously the Russians weren't going to make this a secret.
Well, they tried to keep it secret, yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously they wanted to get them installed before we knew about it, but the fact that they were above ground and everything meant that ultimately they knew that we were going to know about it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So, were they testing Kennedy?
Oh, I think so.
'Cause I mean, I think that's what a lot of people say. Is
They were testing whether we would do anything about it,
right.
just just like everything they did.
Now, at this time, you personally were subject to what kinds of security constraints? Was your travel constrained and that?
Well, we didn't travel because our job was there.
Right.
Didn't travel at all.
Right, but if you'd wanted to take your vacation in Europe or something like that, would that have been allowed?
No.
No, you had to stay inside the country.
Yeah, we'll have to stay on the underground.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is, you got, what, 30 days of leave a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you wanted to take those 30 days and go to Europe, would you have been able to do that?
Oh, I guess so, but I wouldn't want to. I'd want to go to Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. But you would have been allowed to go to Europe. But
Yeah.
there are certain
But
places.
there are places in Europe I couldn't even go to when I was in City-sur-Maine.
I mean, Eastern Europe or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I could go to Munich, but that's as far east as I could go. Go to Italy, go to Austria. But I could not go to Eastern Germany at all.
Yeah.
That was held by the Russians at the time.
Now, at this time, the buildup in Vietnam is starting. Okay. Was there any conversations about? Did you ever hear the word Vietnam at SAC headquarters? At this time?
Not really too much.
And how long was your original tour supposed to last?
It was supposed to have been 2 years, and then it went to 3, and then it went to 5.
Why was that?
Because of the turnover of people that were trained in for the war plan, and it's just you couldn't get the people and get them trained in time, and so the tour just was extended to 5 years.
And you were promoted to major where? Where were you when you were promoted to major?
And Davis Mountain,
DM.
1952.
Okay. Okay, just, you were a major for a long time.
10 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so you were promoted lieutenant colonel at
SAC headquarters.
Okay. Now, at this time, what are you thinking career-wise?
Well, I was thinking, of course, going 30 years.
By this time, you'd been in how many years? By the end of your SAC headquarters tour?
Let's see, when I retired, I had 23 years in at the age of, at 1965.
So 63 is when you came to Tucson. So 63, you had 21 years.
Yeah.
So at
And
this point,
the whole idea was we were coming to Tucson to retire, to buy our retirement home and retire.
But you were going to be here 9 years.
Well, not necessarily, just to be at Tucson and be retired.
But you were thinking 30.
I was thinking more 25.
And so the end of your tour, and off it comes up, and they basically give you a choice of where you want to go.
Well, they asked me if I would come to Davis Mountain to be the commander of the munitions maintenance squadron.
Because you wanted to come to Tucson anyway.
That was the way to get here, was to say yes, I'll take the job.
Now, was that a coincidence, or did they know you wanted to come?
No, that was they knew I wanted to come, but it was a coincidence that the guy that was here was leaving.
So this is 1963. We transferred to Davis Mountain. And talk about your new position.
Well, I was commander of the 303rd Munitions Maintenance Squadron, and that I had the I was in charge of the bombs and the crews that loaded them, and then as the Titan II came in, then we got the responsibility for maintaining and loading the reentry vehicles.
So when you first came, it was still an airborne.
No, they had the missiles at that time, but they hadn't gone active yet.
They're being installed, basically.
They hadn't been installed. We installed them all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That must have been interesting.
It was. Yeah.
Who built that? Who built the Titan II?
Who built the Titan II? General Electric had a lot to do with the reentry vehicle, because they're the ones I worked with.
What about the launcher, though? Do you remember?
I don't know who the launcher was. Probably several companies.
So were you dealing with them?
No, I was strictly involved with the reentry vehicle and the warheads.
And those were built by General Electric?
The reentry vehicle was, yeah. The warhead wasn't.
Where were the warheads built?
Gosh, I don't know.
Probably in New Mexico, I think.
Well, some of them I think were. I don't know, to be honest with you. And I never thought about it. We just tell they were coming, and they would come in by airplane, and we'd take them out to our site and store them when we needed them.
And the Titan II is strictly a ballistic missile.
Oh, very definitely.
So
Yeah.
they just basically go up above the atmosphere, separate, and the thing would just fall.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to have it separate at the right angle and speed and height, so it would fall where it was supposed to
It was
fall.
supposed to go. The target it was supposed to go to. Yeah.
Now, I mean, who was that all done with computers? I mean, who were the brains behind all that, figuring all that out?
Well, it was all computerized. Yeah.
Okay.
And they would have. Each site would have 3 targets, and they would change, of course, as requirements changed. But the launch crew would be told which target it would go to, and they would punch in the right stuff, and that was to the guidance system on the missile itself before it took off.
And at this point, are you still considered in operations at this point, or had you shifted over to
No, I'm in maintenance now.
Okay. So essentially now, you are now on the other end of what you were doing in Omaha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was at the receiving end.
Receiving it. How did that feel?
It was all right.
Was it interesting?
Had a job to do. It was a big job because I had 135 men and had all the weapons and all the reentry vehicles and all the warheads to maintain and go out and load. And we'd leave at 2 o'clock in the morning and be escorted out to the site. And of course
Escorted by whom?
Well, by air police and also by a county sheriff. Then if we changed counties, we'd get another different county sheriff.
How many sites did you have?
18.
18 that you were responsible for?
Uh-huh.
Wow, and each site was one missile?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, one Titan too.
So you guys had 18 warheads
Mhm.
to deal with. And of course, these were single warheads at this point. We're not talking about multiple warheads.
No, these were single warheads, but we had more than 18 warheads because we had to have some ready that could replace the ones that.
Right.
For instance, if there was a missile leak, why we'd have to go out and take the reentry vehicle off, and bring it back, and then we'd have to take another one out and put on when it was the missile leak was taken care of.
So you had missiles and warheads, basically. I mean, could one silo, once the silo was used, was it done, or could another missile be put in it?
Oh, it could be, but it would take a long time
Okay. So
because you'd have to completely refurnish that silo because it would be.
it'd be destroyed by.
Oh yeah.
So basically, these are one-off.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So you're dealing with 18 missiles, 18 warheads, and then a sufficient number of replacements to
Right,
make sure all
exactly
18
right,
were
yeah.
operable.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you ever take these things out and I mean, one aspect to this was testing to make sure.
Yeah, they took.
Did you know the shelf life of this stuff?
Yeah, they would take a missile out here and take it to Vandenberg and fire it to make sure it would work.
So kind of always testing the shelf life.
Right,
Did
exactly like.
you ever figure out what the shelf life was?
No, because I had shelf life problems with the reentry vehicle because it had explosive devices on it that separated from the missile at the right place, and those had shelf lives on them, and we'd have to go out and replace those.
So that would just be cycle.
Yeah.
Okay. But those would be taken out and tested as well, though, occasionally, I'm sure. I mean, within the shelf life, when they're supposed to be good, would they pick one out and just go test it? To make sure it's-
No, but I had the EOD capability, so those that we replaced and took out, we would explode.
And how many people man the site at any one time?
Let's see, there were 5, I believe, crew members on the site. There were.
Well, that wasn't under you, though.
No, they had nothing to do with it.
Those were operations guys.
They were all operations. And of course, they had maintenance people too. They had a crew of 5. I believe it was 5 or 6. I don't know, but 2 of them were officers, and they were the launch officers.
Right.
And then they had the maintenance guys there to take care of problems with electricity or plumbing or whatever.
And I remember you were called mating and demating. There was.
We'd made them.
And that means putting the RV on, and then demate was taking it off.
Yeah.
Now, how often did you have to do that, and for what purposes?
Well, of course, the main thing that would happen would be a missile leak. We'd have to go take it off, and then we'd have to go put it back on again. And that was the main thing. That went on all the time. There were always missile leaks. I would get called at midnight and have to go out and go out to the site with the truck that carried the reentry vehicle, which was a big truck, and then have all the people that took to take it off and put on the truck and then drive it back to the site.
So most of that was actually a response to problems. These weren't planned matings and dematings.
That very, very much so, yeah.
And so the rocket was propelled, was it liquid or solid?
It was a liquid.
So that's why you had all the leaks.
Yeah.
And you had to take the RV off because it was dangerous, or it had to be taken off?
Well, in case it exploded,
Oh, okay.
because of the leak of the leak itself could be ignited and exploded.
So
And
it's very dangerous.
this happened at one of the missile sites in Arkansas, and it just blew the reentry vehicle right off the top.
Really?
The whole thing exploded. Yeah.
Wow. Were people killed?
No, they were lucky enough they weren't. But it was dangerous, very dangerous.
How far away did they find the reentry vehicle?
I don't think it was too far away, because it's heavy. It was heavy.
And I guess was security pretty tight when you keep these things back and forth, or?
Well, yeah, very tight. We had, I had a crew of MPs in the front and the back. Plus I had the crew itself was in a truck. And then we had I was at the command car, and then we had the sheriff in front of that. And we'd go down the road, and it would be quite a big convoy. Mm-hmm. And we'd try to keep it at 35 miles an hour.
And of course, you weren't advertising what you were carrying. It was all covered up and everything.
Oh, yeah, it was all covered up.
Yeah. Now, I think, was it during this time that you had, you were flying a single-engine jet across country and you had an issue?
No, it was when I was at SAC headquarters.
Okay.
I'd flown to Albuquerque to give a briefing. And coming back, I
What were you flying?
T-33, an F-80.
Your favorite airplane?
Yeah. And I ran the engine out of gas, so the engine quit.
As engines do when they run out of gas? Yeah.
But that happens. And the only way you could get it started was you couldn't start it above 15,000 feet. So the first thing you'd have to do is...
That's because there's not enough oxygen?
Yeah. There wasn't enough oxygen in the air. So the first thing you did was you had to put the nose down and to go down to 15,000 feet, and you had to maintain 225 knots so that the impeller would go fast enough to start. When you got down to 15,000 feet, you went through your checklist and hope it started. And in this case, it was mismanagement of fuel, and I got the fuel managed right, so it started.
So you basically forgotten to switch over to your other tank.
Yeah, right. I forgot to switch tanks.
No, but on flight, I mean, the airplane didn't tell you to switch tanks?
Didn't I?
Did the airplane tell you at some point, hey, you need to switch tanks? You got 5 minutes left of gas, switch tanks? That wasn't part of the instrumentation?
He didn't have that. But as soon as the engine quit, of course, you start going down. Mm-hmm. And you had to call for clearance to descend from that altitude down to 15,000 feet so they could clear those elevations, because there was nothing you could do. Right. You're going down. And so once you got down and got it started, it was about 10,000 feet, I guess.
Did it start right away, or did you have to go through it?
No, it started right away. You had 3 chances to start. Uh-huh. If it didn't, you bailed out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it started on the first time because you switched the gas tanks.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything wrong with
it. It wasn't an engine problem. It was a pilot error.
This was pilot error.
Yeah. Simple.
And you discovered at the moment you started going through your checklist, or did you actually figure it out on your way down to 15,000 feet?
Oh, I knew immediately why the engine quit, yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting down to 15,000 feet?
Getting it started, yeah. Okay. And hoping it would.
Was that scary?
Yeah, that was scary.
One of the most frightening moments that you ever had in an airplane?
Well, that and the engine fire over the Atlantic.
Around the world?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
That was scary.
Mm-hmm. So what's going through your mind in terms of your career at this point? Because I mean, you're thinking 25, maybe 30, and all of a sudden 23 and you're out. What happened?
Well, I was the commander of the organization, and we had an inspection, and we flunked the inspection, so they fired me.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, why did you flunk the inspection?
It was mainly, you had what we call a 2-man policy, where there always had to be 2 men that knew what the other guy was doing. Mm-hmm. And during a maintenance check, one of the guys left the bay, and that was an automatic flunk right there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They fired you for that?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a big...
No, but it's like anything else. The top guy is the problem. He gets the axe.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And this was what kind of maintenance? What was going on?
It was maintaining a reentry vehicle. Uh-huh. Just a regular inspection. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And so they came in while one was being maintained.
Yeah, it was a regular readiness test, and they not only tested our area, but they had tested every area in the wing. Mm-hmm.
They basically said that you've got to leave the Air Force, or we're going to demote you, or what was the deal?
Well, they just flat fired me and said they're going to get somebody else, and they were going to court-martial me. And
really?
Yeah. And the division personnel officer told him, you can't court-martial him. He just came from SAC headquarters and had all these citations and everything else. Then he came to me and told me what was going on.
The personnel guy.
And I said, well, I said, what if I put in for retirement? And he said, that'll cancel it all. So I put in retirement.
Rather than fight through that
Yeah.
nonsense. Did somebody
Besides that, I would get a bad rating review, and that would completely stop any promotions from then on.
did somebody have it in for you?
Oh, no.
It wasn't a personal issue at all?
Oh, no. This is just, you got caught in the machine.
Wow.
And of course the machine, they got the top guy.
Yeah.
The general wasn't going to take the blame.
Wow. That must have been very intense for you at that time.
Not so much, because I realized what was going on, I was getting to the point where I didn't want to leave Tucson, because I'd gotten orders already to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And they decided they didn't want to send me to Vietnam with all the knowledge I had of the war plan, so they canceled that.
Didn't they do that several times? Didn't you come up several times?
Yes, yeah.
And originally, what were you supposed to go over there and do?
Fly. Actually, I'd go into a munitions maintenance outfit.
Conventional.
Yeah.
But would you be flying combat?
No.
And at this time, was your ability to get promoted limited because you didn't have a college degree by this time?
That was one of the things. Yeah.
So the chances of making full colonel were probably fairly limited. Anyway.
One in 400. Yeah.
Yeah.
The odds were quite large. Plus, with this rating review that I'd always had top ratings, superior ratings, and they couldn't give me one of those because of the goof up.
And one of these guys just screwed up. He just left when he shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And he knew.
And the inspector was standing right there when it happened.
And the guy knew better, but
just didn't think.
Brain lock.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. And so I told the inspector, I says, well, I'm here. There are two of us here. He says, no, that isn't the way it works.
He said, you're here because I'm here. You wouldn't have been here normally.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's pretty tight. I mean, that's pretty unforgiving.
Yeah, it was. It hurt.
Oh, sure.
It hurt very much.
I imagine it did. So that's that point you started thinking, okay, well, probably better served by leaving.
So we were playing bridge with Joe Metcalf and his wife soon after that, and so I said to him, I said, I'm retiring. Is there any chance of getting a job with Sears Roebuck and Company? He says, well, let me think about it. So a couple of weeks later, we were playing bridge, and he says, yeah. He says, come down and take the tests. And I said, okay. I said, and find out that I couldn't get out for 6 months. And I told him, I said, well, I won't be able to get out for 6 months. He says, that'll be all right, because the store was still downtown, and they were building the new store out on not Speedway, on Broadway. And he said, that'll be just about the time we're going to move. He said, that'll be fine. So
Sears was before Whittaker?
Yes.
Okay, because Whittaker was between Sears and University, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to your mainline duties, the munitions maintenance squad and all that, were you also asked to do other things, to serve on various boards and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a little bit of that.
Yeah, they had what I call a 3915 and 3916 board, and then there was a 3932, which was a homo board, where guys that were thought to be homosexual would come before a board. The 3916, I believe, was guys that goofed up, and the Air Force didn't want them. The other board was they just weren't capable for training to go any further, and just couldn't. They were worthless to the Air Force because it was all technical. And then the third one was the board for homo. And so when the orders came from 15th Air Force Headquarters that I was being put on this board, the homo board, well, I went to the adjutant of the wing and I said, hey, I'm already on two boards, and I said, I don't think I should be on this one. And he says, Well, maybe it takes one to catch one, he said.
Oh, that's cold.
He was the captain and I was a major. And I looked at him and he looked at me, and I stopped at the club for a drink that night. And I went up to the bar, and he was sitting there. He turned around and saw me. He said, "Don't hit me." I said, "No." I said, I had to laugh. That was a good one.
Well, I was going to say, it takes a gutsy guy, captain, to say that to a major.
Yeah.
But basically, he said, "No, you're on the board."
Yeah.
So, I mean, given the fact that that's such a hot topic in politics the last several years, gays serving in the military, I mean, obviously back then it was very clear, gays were not allowed in the military.
Oh, exactly right. Yeah. And
So,
I had 12 come before me, the board, not just me. I was the president of the board, and we recommended they all be separated because the proof was there before they ever came before the board, or they wouldn't have come before the board. And so we were just a process, one of the processes, because they had to go all the way to headquarters, Air Force, to be approved. So I said, well, I've had everything. I've had Chinese and everything. I had blacks and whites, and I said the only thing I haven't had was an Indian. 13th was an Indian.
An American Indian.
American Indian. And it's very funny too that they were all very intelligent. This was surprising to me. You know, they weren't dummies. They were very intelligent people, and that I guess the two things go together. I don't know.
I don't know, and they had all served well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They just they would have copies of letters that they'd written to other homos. You know, Dear Mary and Dear Jane, and they really had them cold before they came before the board.
Did it seem at all a shame to you that the Air Force was losing this talent for this purpose, for this
No,
reason?
because really there was no talent involved. They were not what you would call, not one of them was in a sensitive type job. Mm-hmm.
Easily replaced.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So the munitions maintenance job was it all Titan IIs, or were you also handling, were there bomb wings also?
Yeah, well, until the bomb wing left, yeah.
Okay, when did the bomb wing leave?
Oh gosh, about 64.
Okay, so basically you handled both when you first arrived, the Titan IIs were being installed and you had the bomb wing.
Yeah.
The Titan IIs got installed and the bomb wing left. Were those things related to each other?
Well, I had them both at the same time, yeah. But the bomb wing left, and then all I had was the reentry vehicles, and I was transferred from the bomb wing to the missile wing.
Okay. And when you arrived, the bomb wing would have been how many squadrons?
3.
Okay, and each one would have had how many airplanes?
15 each.
Okay. Each airplane carried one weapon?
Mm-hmm.
Basically. Okay, so you basically were talking about 45 weapons there.
I won't confirm or deny.
Yeah, well, I can do the math.
Okay.
Plus replacements and things like that. And so, okay. And so, in total, you said you had 130 some?
135 men.
135 men. And that was at bomb and missile?
Yeah, both.
Okay. And
The guys on the bomb side were the ones that maintained the bombs, and they're the ones that loaded the aircraft. On the missile side, they were the ones that maintained, and they were different than the guys that went out to load them. Mm-hmm.
And who was your commanding officer?
Oh, let's see. At that time, who was it? Can't think of his name. Mm-hmm. That was a funny thing. I was flying a C-54. I went up to get the Air Force the Air Force band and bring back to Davis-Monthan. I was flying a C-54, so I went up.
You going to Colorado Springs? Or?
Colorado Springs, and while I landed and went in to get cleared, and the dispatcher that was canceling my flight said, "Did you know that the president's been shot?" And I said no. And so I started filing a flight plan to leave.
You're up in Colorado Springs?
Up in Colorado Springs, and they were loading the airplane, and I thought, well, I'm not going anyplace. not with the band, because they'll be needed someplace else other than at Tucson. Well, nothing happened, so we took off and got back over to Pueblo, Colorado, and they said, take them back.
Yeah.
So I took them back and landed. But when I got back to Tucson the next day, well, one of my captains met me and said, the commander wants to talk to you. It was a Sunday. So I went to his house, and he said, one of your trucks turned over coming back from the missile site. And the problem is they were not on the authorized route. And he said, I want you to investigate it and report it to me immediately. And I said, yes, sir. Before I left, he was called to the door, and he came back and said, he said, by the way, he says, I want you to investigate why a guy shot himself in your house.
Is it a separate incident?
Separate incident. So I had to go find out. Well, they had investigated already why the guy was on the wrong route. He just goofed. He shouldn't have been.
You made the wrong turn.
No, you just thought it was quicker, and you just goofed. You didn't follow procedures.
Well, this is what, a convoy or what, or just?
No, they'd gone out to do maintenance work.
Okay, this is standard.
This was just a truck
Yeah.
and a crew. And if it'd been a missile, why they'd all been in convoy.
Yeah.
So that was being taken care of, and I reported to the commander, and but the guy that shot himself was fast draw.
Was a fast draw artist?
Yeah.
He was practicing?
He was practicing, shot himself in the leg.
Shot himself in the foot or the leg?
Huh?
Shot himself in the foot or the leg?
Right here. Went right through.
In the thigh?
Didn't hit any bones or anything. Yeah, and I went to the hospital to see him, and I said, what happened? He told me. He was real honest about it. And I said, where's the gun? And he says, well, it's in my foot locker. And I said, well, I'm going to go get it. I'm confiscating it right now. I went and got it, and it was one of these cheap guns you could buy, you know, and it rattled, it shook. So I took it to the MPs, and I said, I want this locked up. They said, we don't take them. And I said, you sure do. I said, you've got a regulation that people can't have guns on the base. So you got a regulation where you're going to put it. And I said, put it there.
He said, I've just done your job for you.
Yeah, and the commander was a captain, black captain, and I said, I want to see your commanding officer. And he said, well, he's in there. And I went in, and we had a little talk. I was a major at the time. And he said, okay, I'll take care of it. But that gun, you just rattled. Ridiculous. But these are some of the funny things that happen.
Yeah. And these are young people that you're trying to...
Very young. Yeah, they're airmen.
Yeah. I mean, the guy who walked away in front of the inspector, how old was he, and what's...
Oh, he was probably 24, 25, but every one of them was very well educated. They were smarter. They wouldn't be in the program, you know. And he just goofed. Didn't think. Yeah, just walked away. Got me fired.
Wow. And they were working on the reentry vehicle.
Yeah, maintaining reentry vehicle.
And the reason for two people being there, obviously, is so there won't be any sabotage or...
Yeah, well, it was called a two-man policy. Just like in a missile site where you have to have two officers, and they each have a key, and they're far enough away that one can't work the other guy's key, and because you only have 2 seconds to do it.
Yeah.
It's called a two-man policy.
Now, when President Kennedy was assassinated, was there any special alert that went into place? Did you recall?
Gosh, I can't recall of any, huh?
Now, let's move forward to 1989, and the Soviet Union is coming apart at the seams. Communism is on the run everywhere in the world. What are your thoughts?
Well, I went back to to when I was on active service, and I could just see the guys changing war plans and going up and down the stairs and going crazy. And I thought back to those times about.
Did you think you'd ever see that in your lifetime?
No, huh?
Did you have a good feeling about it? Like
Very, very good feeling about it.
mission accomplished?
Yeah.
I know not long after that they disbanded SAC.
Yeah.
And,
Peace is our profession. Yeah.
yeah, and they canceled Looking Glass and that whole bit, that whole sort of framework of living.
Yeah, they just canceled SAC and they set up a new command down in Florida. But I had written a top secret memo saying this was going to happen.
Really?
Uh-huh.
When did you write that?
When I was at SAC headquarters.
You predicted it.
I predicted it because of the we were getting no new aircraft, we were getting no new weapons, and I came back from the Pentagon and I wrote this paper and submitted it. I said, SAC it's going down the drain.
Okay, so this was in response to the fact that the Pentagon was not authorizing new weapon systems for you. Oh,
That was part of it.
Oh, so what you predicted was SAC going down the drain.
Right.
You didn't predict the breakup of the Soviet Union.
No.
Okay.
I predicted that there would be no more SAC.
Really?
Yeah.
And is that because the guys in the Pentagon were what? Were being stupid, or do you think they saw things you didn't see, or? No, this was early on. This is in the 60s.
Yeah. No, it was just the whole tenure of everything. They weren't giving us any new airplanes. New airplanes were being built. No new bombs were being authorized.
Is that because the resources were going to other parts, other services, or there was a total?
No, it was
reduction?
the from the president on down.
So the Navy, they felt they weren't getting new resources. They're just reducing defense spending.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because then it went way up for Vietnam.
Yeah, but not the nuclear end of
Not
it.
the strategic end of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That must have been very frustrating for you at the time.
It was.
What kinds of systems were being turned down?
New bombs, new types of weapon systems, especially air-to-surface type things, and they would keep the aircraft from having to go over the target.
You know, standoff sorts of.
Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those were eventually approved, though.
Oh yeah, we had them. We had them in the war plan.
Okay. So it just took time. It just took time
Yeah.
to get them approved.
Right.
Okay.
I'm getting cold.
Yeah, so am I. Anything else?
I can't think of anything else.
Okay, well, I'll think of some stuff. We'll circle back around. This was really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's hard to remember.